Hello, everyone. Welcome to Pre-Conciliar Radio. I am your host, TLM Ryan. With me today is our esteemed guest, Father Timothy Geckle. Father, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, of course. For anybody who does not know, Father Geckle is a priest who is a Sedevacantist. I recently observed him on Cox News with Matt Gaspers. And the two gentlemen there, all three gentlemen, had a very good discussion. And I was very impressed with Father Geckle's demeanor and the way he carried himself. And so I decided to start a series called Sane Sedes. And I'd like to. It was bait. I'm really baiting some of the non-Sane Sedes to jump into the chat because they are a lot of fun. We're going to basically get to know Father, get to know the Sedevacantist community a bit. And maybe dispel some of the myths that online Sedevacantism has perhaps tainted Sedevacantism with. Of course, if people do not know by now, I am not a Sedevacantist, but I do not. I've constantly preached that we should be more angry with the modernists in Rome than each other, who are, as I like to call it, pre-conciliar Catholics. Before we jump into the interview, I'd like to announce the winner of last live stream's comment contest. Remember, if you leave a comment and I like it, I will feature it in my next video. So here we go. This is, let me blow the screen up a bit. I can't read this. Joel Wren 5718. The last video was about how female altar boys drive men away. And Joel says, the Novus Ordo Mass I used to attend sometimes has 3 girl altar servers, 2 female lectors, a female cantor, and at least 1, sometimes 2, female Eucharistic ministers. And then priests will sometimes point out when praying for vocations that this parish has not ordained a man to the priesthood in 60 years. The disconnect is astounding. That sounds like hell.
Wow.
Sorry you had to endure that, Joel. But you are our winner, not for happy news, but very pertinent information. And now we're going to be talking to a priest who has never had to experience that. Let me get this off the screen here.
Yeah,
Matthew, thank you for joining us. Matthew joined us in the live chat. So I want to start out by learning a bit about your background. I understand it that you are a cradle Sedevacantist. Is this true?
Yes. Yeah. My parents came to the position well before I was born. Yeah.
Okay. And tell me a bit about that. Tell me a bit about your parents. What was their upbringing like? How did they come to this decision? I presume they witnessed the horrors of the Second Vatican Council. Walk us through that a bit. I'd be curious to learn more.
Yeah, I talked a bit in detail about it with Matt Gaspers and Stephen Cox, but just very quickly, I guess. My parents both grew up Catholic in Cary, Ohio. There's a miraculous image of Our Lady of Consolation. If anybody's in the area, I really encourage you to go see it. It's beautiful, beautiful church. It has this beautiful outdoor shrine. All of these memorabilia left behind of miracles that were worked, crutches that people left behind who came to there in pilgrimage. So my parents grew up there, and they had a Franciscan seminary right next door. My mother went to the school through 8th grade. My dad did not. And my dad fell away from the faith after high school or whatever else. And my mom, when he met my mom, she kind of brought him back in.
What year was this?
So my mom said, if I remember correctly, that she graduated 8th grade in 65, I think. Okay. And so she said through her high school, so this would be what, 65 to 69, that they had weekly catechism for the high school students since they didn't have a school for high school. And she said through that period, it was like it was changing, and they didn't really know how to teach the new religion because it was so different from
Yeah.
what they had learned and taught before. So my mother was seeing the changes, she said, very slowly in that parish. But then after they got married in 74, they kind of traveled around because my dad was in the military, and then they were in Turkey for a year. And when they came back, it was like, what happened? Like, because they were in Columbus and they were like, it's completely different. This doesn't even look Catholic, let alone what they're
Yeah.
teaching. So they started looking and searching around, and then they found an ad in the newspaper that Father Dennis Chicoine was giving a lecture about Fatima and about the changes of Vatican II. And they went to that in 1981, I believe. And that's when that answered their questions, and they learned, and they've been with the same priests, the same group ever since.
Got it. So it was a lecture by a Sedevacantist priest then?
Yes.
Got
And
it.
there's, I want to shout him out because he passed away in 1991 of cancer. So a year before I was born. Never met him. But everyone that I've known that has met him talked about how saintly he was, how down to earth he was. He'd talk about the crazy times we're living in, but I always remember my dad talking about how down to earth he was, and don't get all worked up about this being the end of the world and all that other stuff. And it was just, he was such a good priest. And one of the gentlemen in late, he passed away now, but he recorded the lectures that he gave in 1982, I think, in Nebraska. And you can find those online, and he's fiery. He is such a good speaker, and he really want to recommend, if you haven't seen those, and for the audience to listen to Father Dennis, because they're excellent talks.
Got it. Can we find those on YouTube?
Yeah, they're on YouTube. I know Catholic Family Podcast has them, and also the Catholic Wire. A good friend, Father Carlos Zepeda, he has a website and a YouTube channel with them as well, and they both of those channels have excellent content.
Perfect. So yeah, go check that out if you're looking for Father Dennis's lectures. So yeah, sorry, I was interrupting you. That's so your parents
not at all.
came to the conclusion in the mid 80s.
Yeah.
What was it about when they came back that things were all different? Is it because they left in the mid 60s when things hadn't fully transitioned yet? And then I presume in Turkey, maybe they couldn't. What was going on in Turkey? It seems like there was this huge shift when they came back.
I don't know if they were really practicing at the time. Yeah, I don't know if they were. When they came back, they did. Okay. But from what my parents said, it was like, in Cary, the changes came very slowly and very slight changes, because it was it was a national shrine of pilgrimage, and people came there for Our Lady, and they didn't come for modern stuff. But when they went to Columbus, Ohio was much more progressive, and all the parishes that they were going to and trying to find something that was more like what they grew up with, it was all just a bunch of liberal preaching and liberal stuff. Like the visuals were completely off. The way the priests handled themselves and talked and preached, it was all just completely different to them. And that was after, that was just a couple of years difference, but difference in one city to another in the same state.
Right. Yeah. I think when obviously neither of us we're both millennials. Neither of us were around during these changes. But the changes were beginning while the council was in session too, a little bit. So it was about a decade of slow, boiling the frog.
Right.
And it's got to be kind of a bit of a grace for people like your parents to kind of have a detachment from that, and then have like one snapshot in the past, and then you come back and it's so radically different. That's actually very cool. I've sometimes wondered what the saints would say if time travel them into the future. I imagine they would come to probably pretty similar conclusions. But it sounds like to your parents, it was so jarring that they knew something was wrong.
They knew something was wrong. They didn't quite understand what. And they were, I think, they were married in 74, and from what my parents have said, they kind of went along with a lot of the liberal mindset and revolutionary, not like they weren't hippies, don't get me wrong, but lessening or laxity with whatever. But then they found the CMRI, and the CMRI were completely the opposite spectrum. This was back before the Bishop Schuckardt was there and took things way too far. So the contrast was like, whoa. And then they were taught all these prayers, and then they were given the catechism to learn, which they hadn't picked up probably for a decade by that time. Maybe not, but 5-6 years. And it was like, oh, this is what Catholic living is. This is the Catholic faith. This was how you live as a Catholic. It's not just about going to mass once a week, maybe. It's about living it every day and having a relationship with God and living a holy life and praying the rosary and all these other things that they were just oblivious to. So the Catholic life, that was completely different for them as well. It wasn't just about going to church and liking Latin more. That's not what it was.
Right. Of course. It is funny. I've often posited it's not original to me, but I've often thought that most Catholics who lived through this tumultuous time and the continued tumultuous times, they may not be aware of some of the magisterial issues that are going on, but they certainly recognize the praxis has changed. They feel, I mean, you can't not feel that because your way of worshiping is vastly different.
Right.
I actually think that's why the modernists in Rome are trying to crack down on the pre-conciliar practices, because it peels the curtain back a touch. But okay, so you're born in 92, and you're right. Have you ever been to a Novus Ordo?
Twice. One was for a cousin's wedding, and I don't remember anything because I was probably like 7. And then the other was for my uncle's funeral when I was in high school, and that I do remember. Yes. Very odd, very strange. Yes,
because you were just brought up pre-conciliar.
Never went to anything else. No liturgical experimentation. It was all the same. Yeah.
So you then probably got a similar shock as your parents did during the funeral, correct? What was that like?
For me, at the funeral?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I grew up hearing about the changes. I mean, it wasn't something that was like preached all the time. No, but I listened to my parents talking with other people that came around the same time. There's a group of them still there in our parishes that have been around and together. A number of them have passed away, of course, but I would hear stories. I would hear stories about Father Dennis, and I'd hear stories about Mount St. Michael's and about the old, and I'd hear sometimes, occasionally, though my relatives didn't get into it much because they already had their fights and their fallings out before. I'd occasionally hear my mom or dad or uncle mention something to my relatives, about the altar girls or something like that, or my grandfather, who was very devout to Our Lady and hated all the changes and stuff, but went along until the last 10 years of his life. I remember him complaining about things, in the Novus Ordo, and he had grown up at that parish his whole life. So I heard the story, so I knew what to expect, but actually, being there in person, it was like, really?
Yeah.
You're in this beautiful, big cathedral like basilica. And it's just, I want the thing that I remember the most was, of course, we don't believe it's a valid mass. We don't believe it's actually a Catholic mass. So we were just sitting there. We were there to pay our respects to the family. So we didn't get up and take part or anything, of course. We can't in conscience do that. But so we're sitting down, and I remember during the sermon or the eulogy, whatever, the Novus Ordo priest was talking about how everybody needs to come up for communion. Everybody needs to take part. And we're, of course, celebrating the life. It's white and it's whatever. And I think he was looking at us, but I know there were Protestants and non-Catholics there that came up for communion. There's quite a few people there. And I remember him glaring at us during communion because we were sitting there not taking part. And he's looking at us like, weren't you paying attention? Kind of thing. So I remember that being awkward and uncomfortable and weird because, again, growing up with the Catholic teaching is non-Catholics can't receive communion, period.
Right.
So that's the thing that stands out the most in my mind.
Yeah, that's pretty egregious even for today. I mean, most of the Novus Ordo priests are more conservative now, and they're at least, not saying that, or some of them have the courage to gently remind people of the teaching. What year was this?
Oh gosh, it probably was like 2004, 2005, maybe something like that. Around there, anyway.
The hyper radicals are still in. Shelley has now deemed you Father Sane Sede.
I don't know about that, but it depends on your definition, I guess.
Okay, well that's interesting. Well, and it is funny because I think online the perception is that all Sedevacantists are basically disaffected uh, Catholics who convert into Sedevacantism, which
Mm.
clearly Sedevacantism has been around since the council. So um, there's, I think Mel Gibson is also a cradle Sedevacantist. If I caught his interview on Joe Rogan correctly, he was
Mm.
explaining that his father was. Um,
Yes.
so we're going to be seeing more of this. Um, and in any event, that's partially why I wanted to talk to you versus a convert per se,
Mm.
because well, it's unique, but it's not going to be unique much longer.
Right.
How what was the community in your childhood like? I think you said you were a CMRI.
Mhm.
Did you make friends throughout that? Did they have a school? What was that like?
Yeah. So yeah, I was at the Seminary, but for a time there, my parents were also going down to Bishop Dolan down in Columbus. One of his priests would have mass in Columbus, and for a time when I was very young, that was closer. I vaguely remember that. I was very little. So it's not just like only the Seminary. Like we knew
Mhm.
Bishop Dolan, and every year he did a pilgrimage actually in a day of pilgrimage or recollection in Cary to Our Lady Consolation, and we would go to that every year. It's very beautiful. There's a memories of Bishop Dolan from when I was very young. Um, excuse me. But at our parish, our Mother Perpetual Help Parish in Sulphur Springs, Ohio, it was a relatively small parish, obviously compared to what you would be used to. Um, but I think there were, 70, 70, 80, 90, something like that. I don't remember.
Mhm.
It came and went over the years. In Ohio, there's a lot of different traditional groups and a lot of different Sedevacantist groups as well. So people had a lot of options there. Um, especially compared to where I am now. But in our parish, very solid. It was just, I hear so many stories of people that have gone through the ringer of looking for a traditional parish or conservative parish or all these changes and all these problems and stuff. And I'm like, there was just nothing like that. I can't thank my parents enough and thank God enough for that. That's just the stability that comes with that when you're growing up. There's not, oh, okay, we're used to these set of rules, but now we found another group and we have to follow these rules now. Like there was none
Right.
of that. It
Right.
was the same. It's the same ones that we follow now. Um, and so there was just the stability was beautiful. I mean, like
Mhm.
obviously at the time it was just like, well, no brainer. That's what it is. But
Yep.
now looking back at it, especially as being a priest and working with in schools and stuff, it's like I value it so much now because again, that word stability.
Mhm.
And contrary to what some people might think, it's not like Father was getting up in the pulpit every Sunday to just talk about the evils of Vatican II and all this
Right.
stuff. No, I mean, I don't remember him talking about it. I remember him talking about virtue, about holiness, about living your faith, about the sacraments, about those things, about how to live as Catholics, because that's what the point is. How do
Mhm.
we love God? How do we serve God? How do we live or have a better spiritual life? That's what it was about. And Father James McGilloway, he was one of the early CMRA priests. He's one of our oldest now, yet living. He was my priest for at least 10 years. So basically, my whole childhood. Um, and he was a wonderful priest. He's such a holy man. If you would pray for him, his health isn't so great now, but I mean, the humblest man you will ever meet, so zealous for souls, yeah, very holy. But that was my priest my whole life. And I'm not trying to sugarcoat it or anything. I'm not saying everything was perfect. Of course
Yeah.
not. But it was a wonderful upbringing. Occasionally he would switch with some other priests, other samurai priests. So like Father Francisco Radecki, I want to shout out him for a second here. He actually baptized me. He has a twin brother that's a priest as well in
Oh wow.
California. So twin brothers with the samurai since the early days, they're priests. They have a St. Joseph's Media website where they have written several books. I have some up here actually. Some of them are like these big, thick books where they go into, like one is called Tumultuous Times, and it
Mhm.
goes through the ecumenical councils of the church. The first half of it is on all the councils before, and then the second half is about the just Vatican II, and it contrasts the two really well. It's very simple. It's not like some really difficult thing to read, but they also has simple things as well, little pamphlets and things. So they're writers, they're always doing books. So whenever he would come, every couple months or whatever, he would almost always talk about, Vatican II or the changes or something they're doing in their book or whatever.
Right.
But that's about all I remember about talking about those kind of things in church, because it was about living the Catholic faith.
Yeah.
And just saw a comment there. Can you define
Yeah.
CMRI? It stands for, in Latin, Congregatio Mariae Regini, whatever. I can't think of it right now on the spot.
He's not a real Sede. He can't speak Latin. He's not real.
I could. Congregation of Mary Immaculate Queen. My brain isn't very sharp. But Congregation of Mary Immaculate Queen, that's what that stands for.
It's one of the largest Sedevacantist groups, if I'm not.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
There's quite a few different groups, yes, but it is definitely the biggest.
When I Google, Sedevacantist groups, it's the first one that pops up. So.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the stability and the non-harping on Vatican II, because that's actually what I would expect when you've reached such a conclusion. It's like, okay, next. Right? Like we've already kind of dealt with like how we determine the crisis, and we're just on to back to living the Catholic faith. That's actually, I was on with Anthony Abate. I think he was one of my first guests, and I was positing with him and Catholic Esquire that maybe we should stop talking about Vatican II so much and just get on with the living. That seems to be it's like crack cocaine to these people, though. Like, not Anthony and him, but like everybody on the YouTube sphere. It's like they just love talking about it, and I understand, because it's dark and mysterious, and that draws people into wanting to know what happened. But I could imagine from the Sedevacantist position, it's like, okay, we know what happened. Now let's get on to it. I want to get onto it to other things. That's actually why I named my channel what I named it, because I love learning about the Catholic faith. Anytime I hear about like a new thing, like even the new decade of the Rosary, I'm just like, meh, not going to do that. Like I just recoil at all of this new saint. I'm going to learn about the old ones. And so I envy that quite a bit, that you had that upbringing. I think a lot of people envy that, whether they wanted it through a Sedevacantist route or not. That's what most people want. And I've been on Twitter, swooning over the sisters of, I think, St. Thomas Aquinas. I'm so jealous that there's children that get to learn from those sisters. That's what, my grandparents had before. Right. That's what every Catholic probably would have had access to, unless you were super rural and remote. But anybody within a mid-sized city could probably have experienced that. And then they put out videos on Twitter, and one of the sisters, she's one of the younger ones, said, now for the older children, you should be moving beyond just stopping your sins. You should be moving towards perfection, because that's what sanctifies you. And how do you do that? And I'm like, oh, like what's next? How do you do that? I'd never been taught that. And I have a very good priest, very traditional. But these are the things that, slip through the cracks, right? Like if you're not formed in this. So, I was just sitting there attentively. I use the Adam Sandler meme when he goes back to school all the time, because they are doing what Catholics should be doing. Yeah. And so I just wanted to throw those two examples out to show that, I'm jealous.
Well, it's a holy jealousy, isn't it?
Yeah. It's not I don't want to take it away from you. I wish everybody had it.
Well, that's the point of the church, is to make that available to everyone.
Yeah. So did you go to school did they have school there? Or were you homeschooled? What was that like?
Yeah. So at first, we just had my parents homeschooled us. But then in 99 or 2000, I think it was 2000, we were able to start a small school in our parish, and that was with the CMRI sisters. They have a blue veil, wonderful sisters. And so we had that for 6 years. And I think we had right around the first year, we had 12 students. That was it. And then we had 20, 21. I think the most we ever had was 24. But it was a wonderful, wonderful school, wonderful sisters. There was a group of kids that drove up from Columbus every day an hour and a half every day, one way. They got in a van together, carpooled, and made that trip every single day so that the parents wanted them going to that school. Is awesome. But the education was good. The Samurai sisters are excellent. And after those 6 years, there's actually, sadly, a group of the Samurai sisters left and went back to the Novus Ordo. And so they weren't able to keep the school going anymore. And that's an interesting chapter. I haven't watched it myself, but some of my parishioners have actually. They interviewed one of the Novus Ordo nuns now that left, and they were like, boy, the reason she gave, it was all very emotional and wishy-washy, whatever. And then you compare that to one of the CMRI sisters that did an interview, and she's been there since the 60s. And it was all just so solid and good,
Rational,
and
I bet.
positive, but real.
Yeah.
What was that?
I bet I would imagine it was more rational.
Yeah. So it's interesting. It was unfortunate, but God's will be done.
Yeah.
So we weren't able to have it. So I was homeschooled my freshman year because my parents wanted me back, me and my older sister back. And then we went to Omaha, Nebraska, where Bishop Hiverunas has Mater Dei Academy, a K through 12 school, where he has boarding students for the older students. And that's where I met the Davises. That's where my faith really bloomed and blossomed. And that was with the CMD sisters. Those were sisters that Bishop Hiverunas started after he was ordained or consecrated a bishop. He needed sisters under him that he could be directly, have charge over and help him out in his work as a bishop. At the time, he was not the superior general of the CMRI. So, so I've had experience with both as a student, both the CMRI sisters in grade school for 6 years, and then the CMD sisters in high school, as well as the other priests that were there at the school. And again, just wonderful. I mean, they're different congregations. They have a different, rule and some different focuses and different style and way of doing things, but they're wonderful. They're both of them are just wonderful. And that's
what are the ones that I'm constantly tweeting at? The Thomas Aquinas.
That's the Sisters of Thomas Aquinas. Yes, they're under Bishop Sanborn.
Okay.
Yeah, and Bishop Selway there. Yes.
Shelley's got a good question. Shelley's very curious, so she wants to know why there are so many different Sede groups.
That's a great question. Yeah. There's so many different groups. I mean, yes, there's a CMRI. There's the group is Bishop McGuire and from the late Bishop Dolan in Cincinnati and their satellite parishes. There's Bishop Sanborn, the Roman Catholic Institute, and the bishops and priests with him. There's the IMBC in Europe. There's many. There's the SSPV, which they're a big group as well. There's so many different groups because since Vatican II, there have been so many different takes on what has happened and how to deal with it. We all agree in these different groups that we don't have a pope at the moment. And how do we handle that? What do we do with the different situations or the different questions that come up? Or, it's not about the core issues of the faith. People will look at that and say, oh, there's all these different groups. You guys don't have unity. It's like, well, we have the unity of the faith. It's not a dogma of the faith that we don't have a pope right now. It's not a dogma of the faith about this or that,
I guess this is just me on the outside looking in. My response to Shelley would be was because there's no pope, according to the Sedevacantist. So there's going to be this natural hierarchical kind of dispersion. Just natural.
There's questions and there's different answers to those questions, not about faith and morals as like the things that must be held as Catholics.
Right, you're not debating whether or not the funeral attendees should go up and receive.
Right, so, exactly. Yeah.
When did you start discerning a vocation?
When I was a little kid, I loved to serve the Mass, and I was in choir since I can remember, before I could read, because my mom was a choir director. So we were very involved with the church. I grew up, since the time I was 4, we were 7 miles away from our church. So anytime there was Mass, we were there. So we had Mass on Sundays in the afternoon. Father James had a morning Mass, and then he'd come and have afternoon Mass for us. And then later on a third Mass in the evening elsewhere. And then we'd have Mass 2 to 4 times a week besides Sunday. And anytime there was Mass, we were there. Every day we prayed the rosary in our family, every day. anytime there were devotions or anything at church, my parents made sure we were there. If my dad was working, obviously he wasn't there, but my mom made sure we were there all the time. So they gave many opportunities for grace, also involvement with the liturgy through singing and through serving. So I always loved serving. When I was a little kid, I'd be like, oh, that's cool. It'd be cool to be a priest. I'm going to be a priest someday. But that died really quick. It didn't last very long because it was just a little kid like liking to serve and other things.
Yeah, just like how every little kid wants to be a teacher because that's the only thing he sees is
sure
as a career path is his teacher.
Yeah. Well, and it also says, you know, the example that was given to us by our bishops and priests, like that was something up here I'd like to aspire to. It wasn't like, oh, I can't wait for this. You know, I wish we had this other, you know, it was, they were good, holy bishops and priests, and they were wonderful examples. And, you know, Father James was quite a bit older. So it wasn't like he was a buddy with us. He was like this revered priest.
Right.
He still is today. But there wasn't, there was a wonderful example that was given to us and a love for the faith, and we practiced it. That was the most central thing. Like, you know, that was the central thing in our life growing up. And my parents, I can't thank my parents enough for that. Everything centered around that. So it was a very good, how would you say, the groundwork was laid there for a vocation to grow, you know, the training, etc. And in school, obviously, it was the example of the sisters was very edifying. Obviously, they were wonderful sisters. We love the sisters. And then high school is what did it. My freshman year, we were homeschooling, and one of the required reading books was Fabiola. I don't know if you've ever read that.
I haven't even heard of it.
I think it's by Robert Hugh Benson. I think it's one of those English convert writers, cardinals, whatever. Okay. Fabiola. It's kind of like a historical fiction book. It's about different early Roman martyrs that lived together, knew each other, and then about a pagan that converted because of their example. And I don't know, by the grace of God, that book just made the faith come alive to me. Like it meant something to me. And I was like, it really made the saints, like they were real. Like they were kids too. Like, you know, it made it like mean something to me individually. And that coupled with all of the training and good example and everything else, like made me now like, okay, I want to do more spiritual reading. I want to pray, even though my parents aren't telling me to. I don't know, it sparked something. And then the next year I went to Omaha. I was out there, and that is where that was life-changing for me, because I went from a small parish with a couple other guys in the parish that were my friends to boarding with, you know, 20 other boys my age. We were taught by the nuns, and the priests were awesome. Father Gronenthal, I got to shout him out. Father Christopher Gronenthal. He was our border master, and completely different from Father James in that he was younger. He was always like, we're Catholics, we should be the happiest people alive. Like, it's not doom and gloom. It's like, you know, let's go sledding. Let's go do this. Let's have a good time. Let's enjoy this and enjoy that. Not sin, but enjoying things in their proper order. And it was awesome. As teenagers, man, it was so much fun. I loved it. And that's where I got to know Kevin and the Davises and others. A lot of good friends. The sisters were amazing. The priests. We got theology class every morning with Bishop Hiveronis, who's there's no one alive that I respect more than him. He's like my father. Like, he's our father. And we respect him so much. Perfect? No. But I've never seen anyone that has, I don't know, I can't speak highly enough of him. And his theology classes were amazing. And they really taught you how to defend your faith. And we learned so much from him, examples of the priest. And sorry if I'm going on too long, but
no.
So my sophomore year was just fun. It was just fun. It was exciting. Everything was new. My junior year got a little bit more serious, because then I started thinking, like, I got one more year after this, and what am I going to do? And the biggest thing for me was seeing what the priests were doing. Because the priests that were teaching us all week, and Father Gronenthal, for example, teaching us in the classroom and then doing stuff with us outside of the classroom, and Father Gregory, who was teaching in the high school and the seminary, and the bishop, they were teaching all week. And then Friday or Saturday comes, and they're getting in the car and they're driving off to mass centers 7-8 hours away to have mass for people. So they were in this constant cycle. Teach all week, drive on mission. Teach all week, drive on mission. Teach all week, bring the Mass and Sacraments to people. Middle of the day or whatever, somebody's dying down in Kansas and there's no other valid priest around that we know of or that would go see them. So we're leaving right now. Like that, we were surrounded by that because, like Father Gronethal, he was very personable. So he talked to us about what was going on, what he did this weekend, whatever. And so sometimes to get out of algebra class, we would talk a little bit about what he went through,
Yeah.
And it was, to me, it was not like, oh, I so want to be a priest. And I just feel like God is calling me. It wasn't that at all. By no means. It was, I was seeing what the priests were doing. I was seeing their good example. I was inspired by it. And I was seeing, like, at the time, there were only a few seminarians that at Modern Day Seminary there in Omaha.
Mm-hmm.
There were only a few. And we were right next, the border boy house was right next to the church, which was right next to the seminary. And so we could see, wow, there's 4 seminarians this year. And this is what all the priests are doing. And so for me, it was like, well, if nobody else is going to come, I guess maybe I should try. It's kind of like that.
Yeah.
It's not what I wanted to do, really. I really wanted to get married. I was really drawn to that very strongly, very emotionally. Enough said there. But so my junior year was pretty rough because I was trying to sort that out. I was looking at the need for more priests and the lack of them. So that's basically what got me thinking. And then at one point in my junior year, I resolved, like, I don't know, after a lot of worry about it and anxiety and other stuff, I just I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to try. Even if I last a month, I'm going to try, see how it goes. And then my senior year, came back so excited. Awesome group of people, awesome groups of boys that year. Great group. Loved it. But a couple weeks into school, maybe it was a month into my senior year, I was having so much fun, having such a good time, and other things, that I was like, I'm not going to survive another year and then another summer. My vocation's going to die. I know I'm not going to have the courage to come back after this, because I just love it so much. Really, that's how good it was. I loved it so much. And so I thought about it, prayed about it, and I was just thinking, like, I really don't want to go to the seminary. I really don't want to even try it. I don't want to. And if I wait this long, I'm going to lose it. And I know that's not what God wants. So I talked to the bishop first. I had enough credits to graduate early. And I talked to my parents. My dad was excited about it right away. And my mom was like, are you just doing this to be with your friends in the seminary? It was kind of funny. Not what I thought from my mom. But anyway, I graduated in the first semester. So I joined in January of 2010 when I was 17, because I was just like, I don't know, but I'm going to lose it if I don't go in now. And I've got the courage now. So I got to do it before it gets too hard.
Yeah. Just pull the Band-Aid off.
Yeah.
We have a couple. Let's take a break from the interview, and because a bunch of people are curious.
Sorry, Ryan, you're breaking up. I didn't hear what you just said there.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Somewhat.
How's that? Looks like we might have lost Father. Let's give him a second. Can anybody in the live chat hear me, or is it Father who is coming out? Okay, I'm fine. Yeah, I think it's Father. We'll give him a second to come back in. Yeah, Matthew, he broke up a couple times. Let's go. I'll go to some of the comments while we're waiting for him to join back in. Where did I leave off? What books are best for children? I do a bunch of saint books with my children because they're small. I mean, they're 4 and under. I think, I was Protestant, and the only thing Protestants talk about is Jesus. Jesus is a very difficult example to live up to. The saints can sometimes humanize and bring good example down to earth. Okay, Father's back.
Yeah, I guess it was my end. My apologies.
I tested it in the chat, and they were like, "No, it was fun." Yeah, I was just before you jumped out. I was saying, let's take a break from your story and get to some questions. People have a bunch of questions for you.
Okay.
I
Everybody's relieved.
was
That's like when you're given a sermon and people's heads start to go like this, and the kids start nodding off. You're like, okay, cut it off, cut it off, cut it off.
Let me ask you one more thing before we get to the chat about the priesthood.
Sure.
What is your favorite thing about being a priest?
Wow. I could list so many things and go on. I would say two things that stand out the most. One would be the thing I was most terrified of before becoming a priest, and that was confessions.
Okay.
Working with people in the confessional, helping them in that area. It's one of those things, like sometimes it's the biggest cross, but it's also the biggest blessing. And the second thing I would say, the one that's most impacted me, again, many times very difficult, but very powerful, is helping people get ready for death when they're on their deathbed.
For some reason, I knew you were going to say that. I don't know how I knew that, but I was.
Giving them the last rites.
Why is that?
All of those things. Because when people are dying, a lot of things don't really matter. And in those moments, especially in the last moments or the last days, whatever, they don't care about the drama online. They don't care about what their dad said to them when they were 4 or 5 or whatever. They don't care about this or that thing. They're worried about standing before God. And the worries and the fears and other things, to be able to come to them and say, here are the sacraments, and let me encourage you with this. And there's some of these prayers in the ritual that are to help people in those hours are so beautiful and so powerful, and such a seen the relief and the help and assistance it gives to people when they're dying or in those kind of situations. As one Protestant convert I have, he told me, and he recovered, he was fine now, but he was like in his 90s. And he was like, man, when things like this happen, I'm so glad to be Catholic, because as a Protestant, you're told, oh, don't worry about it. You're going to heaven. You believe, you're saved. Let's talk about the weather or the sports. You want to talk about the sports and I'm about to die? Like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then the priest comes and tells you about faith and hope and charity and contrition for sins, because everybody knows at that time, they remember all the sins they committed. They remember the things that they did wrong, and they have to come to face with it. And then you're reminded of that and the sufferings of Christ and all that stuff. As I said, sometimes it's so many times the greatest blessings come with the greatest crosses. So sometimes it could be the most challenging things or times or whatever, but I would say those are the two most powerful things to me.
Interesting. I was gonna, if you hadn't said confession, I was gonna ask what your thoughts were on that, but okay. So that's
can't talk much about it, but
right, yeah. Okay, so
I would say, sorry.
We have a couple questions. I think just like Sede 101.
Okay.
This is from Meathammer 4230. Do I need to be a Sede to get to heaven?
You need to be Catholic to get to heaven.
Right.
The conclusion about this.
Do you have to come to the same conclusion about the vacancy or non-vacancy of the Pope? And is this partially where Sede groups differ?
Well, there's a difference between the Sedevacantist position and the Sede privationist position. That's a different take on it. But ultimately, what it comes down to is it's not a dogma. It's a theological conclusion that we hold based on the facts. Like, the reason we hold it is so important is because our belief in the papacy and our belief in the Catholic Church. Catholic Church can't teach error. And we see errors that have come out of Vatican II and have come out of the encyclicals and other things. And so there's to us, it's very important. It's a tenet of the Catholic faith that the church can't teach error. Well, this church is teaching error, therefore it is not the Catholic Church. And if that is the Pope, then I must obey them in matters of faith and morals, etc. Don't need to get into that more detail, but it's a question of what we believe the Catholic Church is, and we believe it's a spotless bride of Christ. Now, there's so much confusion that's come about through the council. So I have people that come to Mass that aren't Sedevacantists, but I know them and they know the Catholic faith. They don't go to the Novus Ordo. They don't accept any of the modernist stuff. They just don't agree with the conclusion. they're treated just like everybody else. They're not. We don't consider them non-Catholics. They profess the Catholic faith.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. Let's see. We had a this one was interesting. I think. Let's see. No, I thought there was one about the validity of the Mass. Maybe this. Maybe I just misread this person's question. Well, I'll pop it up anyways. Would Father be able to talk about the Sede position on validity of Novus Ordo consecration of bishops and priests, how this affects the FSSP, other TLM groups? Could I also add in my, could you also reiterate the non-validity, in your opinion, of the Novus Ordo? You said it, but you talked about it on Cox News. It was actually, I had to Google it because I didn't know they changed the words of consecration over the wine.
Yeah. Yeah.
So could you enlighten us a bit?
Yeah. So, you know, we know that the church has authority in matters of the liturgy, but the church doesn't have authority over things that are a divine institution. So the Mass and the sacraments are a divine institution. The church cannot make substantial changes to them. She does not have the power to do that. So the church's job, one of their jobs, is to preserve the Mass and the sacraments from being tainted and changed. So with regard to the
in a material sense, right?
In a substantial sense, right?
Yeah.
The matter, form, intention, those things can't change. So with the Mass, that's very brief. That's very quick. You know, the Novus Ordo Mass that was in 1969, that was signed off by Montini, Paul VI. It's an invalid Mass based on sacramental theology before Vatican II, because for a valid Mass, you have to have a valid consecration of the bread and the wine into the body and blood, soul, and divinity of Christ, and both of them have to be done together. Even if you have a valid consecration of the host, it's not a Mass unless you complete that by consecrating the precious blood. And what they changed in that, they changed a lot of other things too. And some people can make arguments about that, but that's non-essential, I would say, or not as important. What they changed with the words of consecration of the wine was that this is the chalice of my blood, which shall be shed for you and for all unto the remission of sins. Instead of shed for many unto the remission, they changed the words of Christ himself in that form. That's right in sacred scripture. And theologians before Vatican II, I'm not taking any after Vatican II, I'm talking about theologians before Vatican II, said this would make it invalid because you're changing the essential form of the Mass.
Right. Just like if you change the words of Christ when it comes to baptismal formula.
Yes. Right. Okay. I can't say, and I made this point in a sermon once when, before our bishop came and gave confirmations, because I was saying, if anybody who's consecrated or confirmed by Novus Ordo bishops or whatever, will do at least a conditional confirmation. And I brought up the point, like if you were to use in Latin, ego te baptizo in nomine Matris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. I just said Matris, not Patris, but that one letter changes it from from father to mother, and that changes the whole sacrament. It isn't a sacrament anymore.
Oh yeah, it's invalid.
It's invalid completely. That's why priests have to be trained on these things and know the importance of it. So with the Novus Ordo Mass, they changed the essential words of the consecration. So,
and if anybody thinks that Father is going into insane Sede land, I will say though, the Eastern Orthodox have the same opinion. The Eastern Orthodox do not view the Novus Ordo as valid. It is, everybody freaks out when Pope Leo has some conversation with the Eastern Patriarchs, like there's going to be a reunification. They are so far away, and Vatican II has made it infinitely worse, not to mention the blessings of irregular couples. But this is not out of like crazy online Sede rantings. I learned this from Anthony Stein's channel. The Eastern Orthodox do not view the Novus Ordo as a valid Mass. It's curious. I had to Google it because I didn't know about it until you mentioned it on Cox News.
Well, and there's really good articles on that too. I'm just giving a very brief summary. There's the Attiavani intervention from Cardinal Attiavani pointing out a lot of the issues there. Different priests have done excellent work on it. And there's another thought there, but I think it's gone. But yeah, it's a matter of fact. It's not a matter of opinion. It's a matter of fact.
Yeah, they did change it. I fact checked you when you were with Matt Gaspers live, and it was true, because that's the thing. On my channel, I kind of talk about how to think. Don't take what anybody says for granted. Right now, we're basically telling you that the Novus Ordo changed the words of consecration. You can Google it right now. Fact check us.
Go back.
Um,
And Archbishop Lefebvre and Archbishop Took, both of them said it was invalid. They did not hold it as invalid either. So originally, Archbishop Lefebvre and the SSPX, they did not hold it. And with the just very briefly with the since the second part of that question was with regard to orders, in 1968 they made a change to the holy orders as well, and they made a lot of changes to it. We, you can talk about the priesthood, the changes and whatever, but for the form for consecration of bishops, they changed the essential form of that as well into something rather ambiguous. And there's people that have different opinions or whatever on that, but the point is that they changed it, and it's ambiguous. It talk about I can't think of it off the top of my head. Again, this is covered very well elsewhere. So that's our position. Again, that was the position of Archbishop Lefebvre, Archbishop Took, and other bishops at the time and priests at the time. That was again a substantial change. So again, that's why we make such a big deal out of the mass. And again, the same church that is pushing the modernist errors of indifferentism and religious liberty and false ecumenism, they erred in faith. What's so crazy to think that they erred in the sacraments as well? I don't see that as a very big deal. If you're saying, let's go worship with the Muslims now, and they change the sacraments, same people making errors in one are making errors in the other. So again, that's something you can look more into it. I don't need to go on more than that.
I know that they changed confession as well. I will say that I've been to both rites of confession, and the traditional one under the SSPX helped me break habitual sin. The new rite was either invalid per your position or per my position significantly weaker. It was taking, just like I think the exorcists talk about this. They say it's taking years to deliver, because they keep such good records. It's taking years to deliver people that used to take months. That's just my personal experience.
Yeah, it's an interesting take, and I'm not trying to be controversial or to fight you on it or anything. I would just say from our perspective, I would say, well, a lot of times there's changes in practices that go along with that. Like if you start going to a traditional rite, you're doing pre-conciliar stuff and not, the Novus Ordo. Typically.
And that's what my channel shows, is that all the pre-conciliar practice, it's not just a matter of opinion. It is actually a matter of fact. There are statistics that show the pre-conciliar practices produce better fruit. I've got one more question from Shelley, and then let's get back to your story. Well, let me vet this first, because I've got a bunch of other ones coming through, and I can't field all questions or I'll derail us.
Right.
What does insane Sede land look like? Oh, there's a lot of good ones in here, but Shelley has a good question. Do Sedevacantist priests administer sacraments only to Sedevacantists, or others as well?
Well, it's kind of like this. It's if you've got somebody that's all in with the Novus Ordo and, religious indifferentism and all this other stuff, we're not going to give them the sacraments. First of all, they don't really approach us typically, but also like somebody has to be living a Catholic life, so, different priests have different ways of going about this, and every situation is different, but there's a big difference in manner of life or whatever. Like for example, sometimes you get cases where you've got people that had 3 annulments, for grounds that are just kind of ridiculous. It's like, I can't treat you as a Catholic if you're spouting about how you've been married 3 times. Sometimes it's just for the craziest reasons ever. I know one lady was like, older lady in one of her parishes elsewhere. Her husband had a cousin or something that was a bishop or cardinal in Rome or something like that. Maybe somebody, not a cardinal, but a priest or something. And they got an annulment, and the reason given, because she was traditional and he was not, the reason for their annulment was that she had an excessive devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary. And on those grounds, their marriage was annulled. Now, if you know anything about sacraments of matrimony, that's absurd. Utterly preposterous. But hey, anything goes.
Right.
So there's those differences in life and treatment out there that it's like, we can't just give the sacraments to just anybody,
Seems like
with all the differences.
it seems like it's a case by case basis. You have to discern where the person's
Yeah,
at
of course.
and
Yeah.
things like that. Okay. Let's jump into then. Well, I want to ask one last thing about your personal upbringing to provide a
Okay.
contrast, and then I want to jump into the Sedevacantist community today. So, where was your extended family in all of this? I know your parents had an awakening and figured out something was
Mm.
going on, and I think you and I have spoken privately that most of your extended family is pretty
Yeah.
much gonzo at this point. Like,
So yeah, I have two uncles that on my mom's side that came along. So my mom's side, she has 8 brothers and sisters, and they're all married. They have a bunch of kids. And my
mhm,
dad has 9 brothers and sisters, and they were all married. And I know some of my cousins and such on my mom's side. I know from what I've seen that they still go to the Novus Ordo, but some of them are divorced and remarried and other such things. It's Novus Ordo land.
yep,
Um, um, yeah, growing up, it was like by the time I came along, my parents and my aunts and uncles, they just didn't talk about it. I think
mhm,
my parents and my uncles were probably pretty nagging about it, knowing them, and pretty strong about it at first. And by the time, like I said, by the time I came along, they just didn't talk about it. I know
yep,
it was odd for us because, like, my sisters are wearing dresses or skirts, and the others are wearing whatever, and just they talk about these kind of things, and we're more interested in Catholic faith and other things. It was just very different. It was very stark. Like my sister, like
yeah,
I remember one time we had this big get together with extended family beyond just my cousins. It was all my cousins, and what a huge family. And it was at a campground or a lake or whatever. And like I have cousins that the parents had no problem with them walking around wearing bikinis.
mhm,
And these are good Novus Ordo, reverent Novus Ordo, somewhat whatever. And yet my sisters are weird because they're wearing skirts. Like the difference of
yeah.
approach and view, and it's like that's what I was used to, and that was basically the extent of my interactions with people that were in the Novus Ordo, was my cousins, and there was just like just we are just
Yeah, they become more and more like the world, and the world does not become
oh
more
yeah,
more like the church. I think
100%.
we've seen that over and over. Okay, so let's talk about then the Sedevacantist community. We were just kind of talking about people coming in from the Novus Ordo, and they might have 3 divorces and things like that.
Mm.
Where do you see converts coming from? Is it from because we're going to get into the online chatter because I have some things to say about that. But it seems to me online that a lot of the online personalities are trying to get the recognizing resistors, and I presume it's because they think that R&Rs see the problem more clearly. But I'd be curious, that online, it's what did Dave Chappelle say? He's like, I don't really care about what goes on Twitter because Twitter's not a real place. And so I was wondering, what do you see on the ground? Do you get a lot of people who are like, I have so had it with the Novus Ordo crap, I
Mm.
want to come to you guys? Or do you see R&Rs who their theories are not working for them anymore and they want to go Sedevacantist? What do you see in terms of converts?
Everything,
Okay.
everything, and I don't think that one is more than the other.
Wow.
Um, well, well, in my experience anyway, here anyway, and again, I'm an architect. Every priest might have a different story.
Of course.
I can only speak from my experience. I've been in Arkansas now 6 years. Um, when we started the parish here, it was basically one family and 3 other people. There were two other older couples. So we had the one family had like 10 kids.
Mhm.
So there were 16 people in 2020. Now we have over 100. It's
Wow.
just blown up, and there's a ton of kids, and there's more people getting married and whatever. And they've come from everywhere. There's
Right.
people that were atheists. There were people that were a lot of Protestants. When we started the first couple of years, 80% of the parish, 90% of the parish were Protestant converts.
Wow.
But we've also had people come from the Fraternity of St. Peter, especially when they recognize like this something's wrong. This isn't the
That's
answer.
is
And
that FSSP?
yes, yeah,
Okay.
sorry,
Okay.
FSSP. Yep. Um, you know, and people from the Novus Ordo too. Some of the people in all different ages too. I'll say that as well. It's not just like older people, and it's not just younger people. It's all in between. There's older people that grew up Protestant and then were in the Novus Ordo for decades, and then were like, something's wrong, and then they found us by the grace of God, or searching, and answered their questions. There are people that were in the Novus Ordo their whole life, and then something happened, something piqued their interest. I know one guy that, God rest his soul, he passed away of cancer last year. The thing that got him, he knew there were problems in the church, but he grew up his whole life in the Novus Ordo, for 46 years. And then he heard this thing about they changed the mass and the sacraments. And he's like, what's that? He was another lawyer. So his brain goes, I got to get to the bottom of this.
He could research.
He did a lot of research. And then he called us up, and he's the one that actually got me down here to Arkansas for the first time. He died of cancer last year. God rest his soul. But the question, just one thing piques some question, and then they start looking, and then they look, and then they pray about it, and then it just opens up the door. So who's coming? It's everybody. I've had teenagers that knew there is a God, knew that Christ must be God, started looking, started researching, started reading what the church taught, and then found us. Their parents are not involved. Their parents were against it, and they found it. There's young people that had just been married, young families. It just anything and everything in between. And that's what I hear. That's what I see from all around the country and in the world too. Some places faster than others, but that's you can't assign these are the people that are coming. It's just all of it.
It sounds like it's more organic than a niche. That's the criticism of some Sedevacantist is it's all these converts who are these like intellectual research types, and like, I have a feeling that if I speak with Father, there's gonna be it's gonna feel more organic. That's actually why I talked about your upbringing. Well, it's just what every Catholic had been brought up with before the council.
Yeah, right.
So it's probably like this. We're dispelling some myths here for some people.
Yeah, and thank you for doing it. Appreciate it.
Well, I think it's important. I mean, look, again, I'm not a Sedevacantist, but I know that you and I have one disagreement on your words, not mine, on a non-dogmatic matter. But I have a million more disagreements with the people up in Rome. Yeah. And the only thing I see online are the Sedes and the R&Rs going at each other's throats. I'm like, you guys do understand you disagree on like 0.01% of the matter. Compared to, I mean, we can't even look at what's going on with the SSPX and Cardinal 2 show. They can't even speak because now they're so far apart on faith and morals. They can't even speak their own language anymore.
Oh, it's completely different. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they had a better shot with Benedict and Lefebvre back in the day. Now it's, I mean, because Benedict never would have gone along with all the nonsense that we now see. They hated him. And now look, now we have the SSPXs remain the same. Although Stephen Cox did tweet today that the SSPX is coming more to a Bishop Williamson conclusion. Yeah. And Rome has just gone off the wall. So that's my point is we should stop demonizing people who we have so much in common with on both sides. But I'm speaking more from my side because traditionalists cannot fight a two-front war. Napoleon tried it. Mustache painter guy tried it. It does not. It does not work, guys. We cannot look. The modernists are dying, but they hold the grips of power right now. We cannot do that. So you and I did not talk about this. I know we could have offline, but I said let's save it for the live stream because I just had a hunch. Your community is pretty much like my community. I mean, because we get a ton of converts too. And I couldn't break it down, as like a particular type. Protestant is big though. And I think that's always because we are from America as a Protestant nation. You're just naturally going to get, a lot of that. With the Protestant convert, I am curious about that sub-demographic. Obviously I think they must be aware that there are other Catholic groups that aren't Sedevacantists. Do they not really, is that like a big hurdle for them? Is it, no, that makes sense. Let's go on to the next topic. Where does the Sedevacantist position come into play with, say, a new convert who, isn't R&R, isn't FSSP? Is that a pretty smooth transition or, how's that go?
Again, it always depends on the individual. Like I've known some of them to figure it out in a year, to go from solid Protestant to Sedevacantist, traditional Catholic. in a very short time, and I've seen others go through 7-year, 10-year process through all the different groups, until they were like, okay, this settles all my problems or questions or whatever. And I've said this quite a few times before. It's like you were saying that the SSPX and Tugo, they speak a different language.
Mm-hmm.
I can have a much quicker, easier time explaining things and getting a level of understanding from somebody that's a Protestant than I do from people in Novus Ordo, because there's a different language and different understanding of things. With the Protestants, those that are looking to become Catholic, the central issue for almost all of them that I've seen is authority.
Okay.
We don't want to be Protestants. We don't want to protest the authority anymore. We don't want to interpret Scripture our own way. We realize we need an authority to determine these things. It's not all about the outward appearances or the numbers or the beautiful churches. That's there too, of course. That only goes so far, as I'm sure you're well aware of in your experience.
Mm-hmm.
But the question of authority is a central issue. It's like one fella I knew that it took a long time, and he went through all the different after going through like a dozen different Protestant denominations and spending time with them, and then checking out the Orthodox for a time. And then, funny story,
he ran the gambit.
he ran the gambit. It was when he was an Anglican, though, that he started praying the Rosary. When he was an Anglican and preaching, or not preaching, but talking about the Rosary. And then that brought him to Catholicism. But, he's a really good guy. And he was like, I became Catholic, but I knew all this Novus Ordo stuff was garbage.
Mm-hmm.
I knew all the modernist stuff was garbage. I studied the faith. I studied all of this stuff. I read the fathers. I read what the church taught. I didn't become Catholic to be Protestant again.
Right.
Now, where's the authority? Who do I follow? Yeah. That's the central issue. Like, and that's one of the reasons why we're so passionate and such a big deal about the position is like, we believe if there is that authority in the church, you must follow it, and it can't lead you into error. And so that's a central issue for them coming into the Catholic faith is authority.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I know that for me, I wanted nothing to do with. I mean, I didn't know about all of this. I thought it was kind of just the mass.
Yeah.
Because from outside perspective, that's really what it is. That's what you're going to interact with the most. And I didn't go to a Novus Ordo for like 2.5 years. I purposefully sought out a Latin mass, and I wanted it to be as Catholic as possible. Yeah. I don't even like it when Catholics refer to themselves as Christians, although I need to get over that because I'm so used to it as being the Protestant word. Like I'm allergic to anything that sounds Protestant. I never refer to myself as a Christian, and I know it's true because you can read Pre-Conciliar writings and the popes will refer to themselves as Christian. So I know I'm wrong, but it's just like, if anyone asks me, what are you? I will just always say Catholic. I'll never say, I mean, always Catholic, because I'm so allergic to anything that feels Protestant. And truly, like, the biggest mistake with the false ecumenical movement out of Vatican II is, and I know this from negotiations, when I negotiate with someone, I need to be strong on my non-negotiables. We can dither on non-negotiables, but you never move towards the other side unless they'll move towards you. And the post-conciliar church has constantly bent towards the Protestants to the point now that they're basically Protestant with the sprinkling of Catholic trappings. And it's off-putting to any convert because, I mean, seriously, if I wanted to be Protestant, I would go to the most like Bible thumping Southern Baptist gun-toting guy in a cowboy hat. Like, I want it to be authentic. So I don't.
You go to the cowboy church, maybe.
Right. Yeah, I guess. I mean, even though it's super cringe, but I'm trying to put myself in that position. Like, if I wanted that, I guess that's. I wouldn't want a Protestant to be speaking nicely of Catholics if I wanted to be a Protestant, right? I wouldn't, because it's not.
If every religion's true, none of them are true.
Right.
There has to be a true religion, and so that means what you're doing must be true. Otherwise, you got to go find the true one. So that means there's going to be differences, and we're not going to approve of this false religion.
My first Latin mass, the priest said in his homily, he said, "And we give no quarter to that damned heretic Martin Luther." And you would have thought, new convert, or not convert, but new guy in the back pew would have been like, oh, how intolerant. No, I like was like, yes. I gave like a fist
It's
bump.
logic. It's simple logic.
Well, it's because I knew enough about history to know that this was a 500-year-old dispute, and they still gave a damn. I thought,
Mm.
if they care that much, I want to be part of. Like,
Yeah,
I'll do
yeah,
my
yeah,
due
yeah, yeah.
diligence. I'm not just going to convert
Sure.
on the spot, but this is something to dig into. And we were talking in the green room a bit about how Sam Shamur debates Muslims, and Muslims, you have to kind of yell at them and be very aggressive with them, because in their culture, they will not view you as having a belief in your own theology if you're not willing to get riled up for it.
Yeah.
I think that, and that to me really describes the difference between pre-conciliar and post-conciliar Catholicism. But you talk about your education growing up, and you were learning defense of the faith. I talked to all my
Mhm.
friends who grew up in a Novus Ordo Catholic high school, say all they did was apologize for the Inquisition and the Crusades.
Right.
So you're just constantly emoting, I don't believe in this. It's not worth
Yeah.
believing in. It's only worth apologizing for.
Yeah,
Um,
and it doesn't matter anyway, because you can go to heaven as a Muslim or a Buddhist anyway.
right.
Father Gronenthal, I mentioned him. He was in high school, our border master teacher. He's looks like my brother now. Um, but he grew up in the Novus Ordo, and I think in his early 20s, a friend of his found out about the seminary. They were in Washington, and he was in his car, and he had a Baltimore Catechism in his car because he was learning. And Father Gronenthal, at the time, just Chris, picked up the Baltimore Catechism. He's like, I've never seen answers. He grew up in the Novus Ordo his whole life. He said any catechism or whatever, it was all kumbaya, Christ is a hippie
Yep.
type of thing. And he saw the Baltimore Catechism and he was like, this is the faith.
Yeah.
I've never been taught this my entire life. It just blows my mind, because those are things that I had memorized when I was 7 in
Yeah.
order to go to First Communion. Like it
Well,
just blows my mind, the difference.
that's how I feel when I see the sisters on Twitter,
Mm,
Sisters of Thomas Aquinas. They are teaching like a 9-year-old. They're like, you really should be shifting away from this stage of spiritual growth
right.
to this. And I'm 34. I'm like hanging my head in shame. Like the 9-year-old in that video is getting better instruction than I am. And it's a shame. I mean, and they hid so much. I mean, that's what it was. They occupied, and then they covered everything up.
They threw it out.
Yeah.
Let's just be blunt. They threw it out, just like they threw out altars. They burned stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
they weren't just like, we don't like this, we hate this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was a complete takeover. I mean, whether it's the communist approach, the Freemasonic approach, or the modernist approach, all three of them working together with different camps. So I think there's different camps even amongst them.
Yeah.
But they hated it. They hated it. And that's pretty clear when you talk to people that lived through it. Like I hear some of the stories from, my people I grew up around, my parents' friends, and the things that they went through. That's why I think some of the people get really riled up about it, because of what they've gone through, the
Yeah.
things that they had to take for decades. Like I have this one simple, lovely lady down in my parish in Little Rock, and she's tiny, tiny little lady, like the sweetest grandma you'll ever meet. And her son found out about Sedevacantism, about the Latin Mass and all that stuff, and brought her once. And she was like, for the last 30, 40 years, every Sunday I've gone out angry because they're so irreverent. They're preaching this different religion. It's not what we grew up with. It's not what we're taught, but I got to stay because it's Catholic. And she finally came to our Mass, and at the time we were having Mass in a hotel,
Yeah.
conference room, because we didn't have a church at the time. We were just doing the best we could. And she was like, I'm so happy because I've been putting up with this garbage for decades.
Yeah.
No.
My grandmother had a similar experience when she I brought her to our diocesan TLM, and she was crying because she was like, this brings me back to when I was a child.
Mm-hmm.
It shifted after that. She then, went on to tell me how she doesn't want to go back to it. I'm like, she loves Vatican II, and
It's difficult.
so you see that in both camps. That's why I was speaking with Anthony Stephen and Catholic Esquire about the whole SSPX situation and all. I forget what Stephen said, but I believe it was Anthony and Esquire were theorizing that Rome won't excommunicate the SSPX, and they were giving me my licks for not having grown up in the the JP2 era, and I didn't understand, so I was feeling like a little guy in the room, but I poked my head up at that comment. I said, you know what, I'm going to disagree with you guys, because, and this is really interesting to watch the modernists. They don't care about anything. They don't care about sin. They don't care about doctrine. They don't care about reverence, but they care about their revolution. And you see that they will, cowardly men and men of weak constitution aren't men of action, but they will be when their inaction is threatened and their laxity is threatened. And I was like, they will excommunicate these guys. And I wouldn't be surprised if they attempt to excommunicate anybody who attends it, as we've seen with that one bishop in South America.
Yeah, right.
It now to the other side. I was talking with my best bud the other day. I'm like, nobody does anything anymore. Everybody just makes because I'm constantly arguing with people online about how the council's got all these problems, and they'll make all these excuses for the council, like it was the culture or this or that. I'm like, man, nobody wants to just put their foot down, call a spade, and start doing something about it. And so the only people I see doing it are, the SSPX or Sedevacantists, who say no, this is enough. I'm making a bold declaration. Something's wrong, and I'm going to do something about it. And I'll even risk, excommunication, whether it's valid, whether it's invalid, whatever your theories on that are, I'm going to risk it. And my friend said, yeah, there was this, I forget if it was a saint or a pope, early Christendom time. And he said that this saint had spoken of, in the last days, men will lose love. And when they lose love, they'll be unable to act. And I don't know what you think about that. I think that describes a lot of modern man. Modern man is so weighed down with all of these material distractions, such that he becomes a slug and isn't inspired by anything. The most he'll get excited about is his sports team winning on Sunday, but you don't die for that. That's, I mean, we can't even find anybody to fight a war for our country anymore. You look at, not that we should, but you see the surveys. It's would you be willing to die for your country? 10%, whereas it used to be 50% of the men surveyed.
Sure.
Would. It's well, yeah, nobody loves our country anymore, and maybe there's good reasons for that, but it's the same in the church. I don't find that there is a love, particularly amongst the Novus Ordo laity and clerics, for the church willing to do anything about it. I mean, they're well, we get these soft soap answers, parish hopping is the problem, or maybe we need to build community. We should just build community, guys. That'll solve it. What are you guys smoking? Do something bold, like the SSPX. Do something bold, like the Sedevacantist. Let's segue here, because I'm kind of ranting. But it seems
you're so much what you're saying is spot on.
It seems
it's putting a Band-Aid on a gaping wound. It's not going to fix it.
Well, it's because they want to stay within the system, and they want to be above board and within the bureaucracy. And it's guys, I got to tell you, the big players, are you familiar with big man theory in historical study?
No.
You basically, the way you study history is just to look to giants of men, and that can basically show you how history changed. You think Caesar, Alexander, Napoleon, Jesus Christ our Lord. I mean, these were people who broke barriers, crossed Rubicons. They were men who did things. And we, you very rarely read about the king who tinkered with the bureaucracy and just made this tiny little reform. It's oh, I'm a great king. No, they really
if you
weren't.
read about him, it's about how it led to a civil war or civil revolt.
Right. Well, this policy 100 years later led to all this derision. I'm oh boy. But anyways,
I really want to touch on something you said there about the will, about love, because it's something my parishioners they hear me harp on all the time, because it's a thing. Yeah, right. It's a thing that is very important, and that is love is in the will, not the emotions. Like that's something that is drilled, that for a solid spiritual life that has to be drilled into you, and to understand it, and basic understanding of what we are, what we're made of. Intellect and the will are faculties of the soul. The heart is used as a symbol of that because of the effect that the will and determination has on the body and the blood pumping through whatever. But the will, love is in the will. And St. Thomas Aquinas will give you the perfect definition of it or whatever, but it's willing the good of another, even though that means sacrifice. And so, but it has to be directed by the intellect. Pardon me if I'm getting too grandiose here, but it's a very simple thing that is thrown out because of the errors of Vatican II and modernism, because the intellect is now blinded with these errors. That's why errors are not something to be tolerated. That's why the church has never tolerated error. Modernism, again, is the synthesis of all heresies, from, as Pope St. Pius X said, and the will is fed by the intellect. You don't will the good of something unless you appreciate that good. If you see it as a good to be sought after or to be defended or whatever. And so the good of the church or the good of the souls or whatever, that's very, very much connected, as he said, to love, which is product of the will, which is fed by the intellect. It's very basic, very simple, but it's like, well, I just got to stay with the church. I just got to be part of the system. Da 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 da. What's Catholic about all these errors? It's not Catholic. These errors are to be condemned, and they lead to all of these problems that you see. And no amount of potlucks and parish meetings or whatever are going to fix those. You got to fix it at the poison source.
I actually find that in my parish, when you practice the faith correctly, all of that community stuff, and we're a commuter. I mean, everybody's a commuter at this point because, you know, the automobile and, you know, the lack of Latin masses everywhere, but the community starts to come together at that point anyways. It's cart before the horse in Novus Ordo land. I agree. But speaking of bold actions, it seems like you've made a bold move down in Arkansas. You guys have a parish now?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. And how long did that take? Seems like pretty rapid growth.
Yeah. Well, when God wants something to happen, he makes it happen.
You said you went from one family and a few couples to now 100 total people.
Oh, over that. So I actually have 2 churches in Arkansas now. Initially I started coming to Little Rock, which is the capital of the state, and we had a small group of people. My first mass in the state of Arkansas. Never been to Arkansas before. I think it was 2017, April 28th, 2017, and it was just at a person's home because there were 6 people there, maybe something like that, 7 maybe. Very small. And then there was some sprinklings of people around the area that Father Gregory, one of my teachers in high school and the seminary, he had been driving down to give them mass and the sacraments like every 6 weeks when he could make it, in between everything else he was doing. So there were people here and there, a small group of people. I think we might have after. So anyway, there's a small group of people that just, they got to mass when they could, when Father came. And I started going down twice a week on a Saturday because I was teaching in Omaha by then. I was teaching high school during the week, and then I had mass centers in Oklahoma and somewhere else at the time. I can't remember. So I couldn't do any more on a Sunday. So I would have mass on Saturday for them so they could at least receive the sacraments, and then go do my other missions on Sunday and then go back. It grew. We got some more people. We were just having mass for a while actually at a funeral home. There was a really nice setup that we had actually. Really worked out. St. Philomena was our patron. She helped us out a lot. And then that grew a little bit. And then those converts came, that one family from Mountain View up here. Long story short, I started having mass for the group up here, which was 16 people. And then due to the generosity of some of the people up here, they basically told the bishop, look, we can support a priest. If you have a priest, we can support a priest. We'll make it happen. And I was like, yeah, there's too much going on. We don't have enough priests. There's no way that's going to happen. They're like, just talk to the bishop. And I called the bishop, like, they could do this. And he's like, okay, why don't you start having mass there next Sunday, and then we'll figure it out. I was like, okay. So we started having mass every Sunday for that group of people. Again, just in their home to start with. We got a little chapel in town. They've got an office building that we set up as best we could, so we could keep the Blessed Sacrament. I moved in summer of 2020. Wonderful year. And that started a little tiny chapel in town. It grew when we had about 25 people or so. An opportunity came up with a Protestant church just outside of town that we were able to purchase that, again, through the generosity of some benefactors. We're able to make it happen. That's something I encourage for the young men in my parish, is like, hey guys, somebody's got to build the churches, somebody's got to build the infrastructure.
Yeah.
So, be successful, work hard. You can use this for the glory of God and the good of the church. So anyway, we got the church there, and it's just one of those things, just God's providence, with the timing and everything. And I'm not saying it's not me, it's just the mass, the sacraments, and God blessed it. So there were some people that had moved to get out of the craziness of 2020,
Right.
people that were from the Novus Ordo or Protestants or whatever, and they moved to this area because it's rural. It's a really nice area, very conservative. And then they found out about the church, and the changes are met, per chance. It's providence. And so it just grew and it exploded. And then one of the very early on, when I was down here, we had a conversation with the men, and I was like, if we want this parish to grow, and if we want to have the full experience, we need a school. Because I grew up with it. I know what the difference is. Like, I remember our parish with the nuns and without the nuns. It like makes it the full experience when you can have nuns there. Changes everything. So I said, that should be our goal. If we can do it. Bishop's, one of his sayings is, God's will is what we can do. If we can't do it, it's not God's will. If we can do it, even if it means a lot of sacrifice. So that was kind of the goal. And this is now our third year of having the school. We have 2 of the CMD sisters who are wonderful. We have 15, 16, 17 students, something like that. Wow. And so now we've had some people that have moved here that used to go to the FSSP or elsewhere, because they want the small town vibe with the parish, with the school. And it's been really great. So there's been so many different factors or whatever, but here, this parish here, we've got over 100 people now, in 16 when we started 6 years ago. So God has really blessed it. My other parish down in Little Rock, we got a church after the craziness of 2020, because it was pretty wild trying to have mass for people when we didn't have a place to go. Like, we had mass outdoors, we had mass wherever we could do it. So we have a little chapel there. There's maybe 25, 30 people there. It's been very small. Yeah, so it's just constantly more work, more growth. Now we need a convent. Now we need a school. Now we need a rectory. Now we need this. So there's a lot of work, but the parishioners here have been amazing. They're wonderful, wonderful parish.
Well, these are the total opposite problems of what you see in Novus Ordo land, which is where, how do we sell off these buildings?
Exactly. Well, and I'm sure you see it in your circles, the youth. Like, it's exciting, and there's a lot of growth and a lot of youth and young families and stuff.
Let me ask you about that before we jump into our final topic. What do you see in terms of average family size, like children per household, on the young side?
As many as God blesses them with. It just really depends. I mean, like I said, the one family, main family, I think they had 13. Another family, they have 9. Another family, gosh, I can't think, 6, 7. So I mean, it just depends. And some, they might only be able to have 1 or 2 or whatever. But it just the norm is large families. The norm is large families. Yes.
I'm just curious, because I do a lot of stats on that, and the average for a traditional Catholic TLM attending is how they define it in the survey. Is 3.6. I think that's going to grow, because a lot of them are converts, who come in after their highly fertile years. But as we see more cradle Sedes, more cradle, traditionalists, if you get married at like 23 to 25, you're going to have 10 plus years of childbearing years. So we're going to see that average tick up. I know before the council, the average was 5.5.
Okay. And
my parish, which has been a traditional parish for a long time, we hit the 5.5 mark in 2023. So we finally, my priest was very pleased about that. We finally, erased the wounds of the council, at least in that area.
Yeah.
But I was, you know, obviously with Sedevacantism, it's about as traditional as you're getting. So I was curious about that. It seems like you track with the other groups.
Yeah, well, and it's as you said, the youth that you're gonna as you have more younger families, you're gonna have more of that because it's, you know, is the norm. It's a mindset thing, obviously, and the more you have people that have been raised in it, or I would say too, a lot of the Protestant converts, like I don't know what it's like, you know, up north, I think it's very different, but in this area, it's very conservative. Arkansas is very conservative, and like in this area, there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of Protestants that are, you know, going back to the basics. And so they have large families. The women dress very modestly. Like you wouldn't be
Right.
able to tell them apart from good traditional Catholics in that score with
Yeah.
modesty and such things. So there's a lot of that around. And a lot of them that convert. And I've said this before, but there's such a difference between Catholics that grow up thinking, how worldly can we be while staying Catholic? You know, and they get all of the effects of all of the different things that they take in and listen to, and the different worldly authorities or Hollywood or other things that they're skirting the edge, or they at least hang on to the practice of the faith, but they don't really care that much. They're more influenced by their pagan friends.
Right.
That's a completely different mindset and type than those that either convert or were raised by parents that insisted on, we're going to be as Catholic as we can be and as involved as little in the world as we can be. And
Right.
so being a good mother and father is not something to be like, oh, it's a death sentence now and I'm doomed, you know, to raise children or whatever. There's such a different mindset mentality
Yeah,
that comes with
it's very important. My goal is to, because my mother and father, my mother has Italian lineage, my father has Irish English lineage. So
that. Mhm.
both were raised, they were both cradle Catholic and fell away after the council. So I
Mhm.
was not Catholic, meaning that
Mhm.
likely the council broke 1700 plus years of Catholic heredity in my family.
Sure.
And my
Sure.
goal is to be the last one that happens to. So my children will. What is last question on that before we get
Nice.
to the
Nice.
spiciest topic, spicy topic of online
Oh boy.
Sedevacantism? What do you see the retention rate in your limited experience?
Mm.
I know this isn't statistically valid, but anecdotally, what do you see the retention
Yeah.
rate? Most people stay? Or revolving door? What's it look like?
Um, Again, it's yeah, it's obviously only anecdotal, and so many things can be generalized that shouldn't. Um, but I think for the most part, it's they stay once they if they
Mhm.
come understanding it. Usually, but the fact that they've found it or searched this hard or this long or this far or this deep into the issues, usually they don't come until they're pretty certain of it. At least for converts. Okay, well, there's two. I guess I should handle it in two different aspects, shouldn't I?
Right.
Those that are raised with it or those that are converts. For those that convert, it's very high
Yeah.
because like people are scared to come to us if they think it's schismatic. They're scared to come
Mhm.
to us if they think we're just a bunch of Protestants and outside the Catholic Church and don't have the Catholic faith. You should be. If that's what we are, then you should stay away.
Yeah.
We're not, but if we were, so usually it's only with a lot of prayer and thought and worry before they come. And those usually are so happy because, as we talked about early, what we're doing is just living the faith. And that's what they want. That's what they're searching for. With those that are raised, I think it goes back to what I just said before you brought up the question. It's like, how were they raised?
Mhm.
Were they raised with that mindset of be as Catholic as you can be? And the Catholic faith is a beautiful thing and something that is central in our faith, in our lives. Or is it just the sideshow? Like I know a number of the kids that I grew up with in at our home parish. They had different standards in their home, and and a lot of them fell away.
Mhm.
Um, None of my family have. The and I'll say some of them have come back. Actually, I just had a old friend of mine. I just found out that his wife, he hadn't gone to mass in a long time, and his wife was an atheist, and listening to Charlie Kirk, heard about
Mhm.
Christ and Our Lady. And through that was like, I'm going to pray the rosary. I'm going to go to the Catholic Church. She went to the Novus Ordo once. Is like, this is garbage. This
Yeah.
is wrong. What's wrong? And of course, meeting my old friend was like, well, I know where we can go.
Yeah.
And that brought him back. Her seeing that this was garbage and like, we're going to find the truth, that brought him back after so many years. I was so happy to hear that.
What a crazy thing for him is like, yeah, like I've
Yeah.
actually been raised in the one place you want to go. Let me show
Right.
you.
Yeah. I'm coming back home here. Yeah.
Wow,
So,
good.
you know, yeah, I was so happy to hear that because you know, we grew up together. But yeah, I think that's the biggest factor. Is how are they raised? What examples? And you know, that's something, again, going back to my parents and how grateful I was, something that they did, and it was a big sacrifice for them. I didn't realize until much later that it was that big of a sacrifice. You know, my excuse me, for high school, we went to boarding school. We were sent away from home. You know, they knew the priests and the sisters, and they knew it was going to be good. But that was life changing for us, because our friends were Catholics then. We weren't hanging out with people and going to the movies or going shopping at the mall or whatever people did back then. We didn't do any of that kind of stuff. What we did for fun was we learned music, Palestrina and Hassler and other bits of music to sing for mass. We
Right.
played sports together. We hung out and we did. It was all centered on the faith, and it was all centered on the church, and it was a bunch of Catholics who were surrounded by. So my parents made that sacrifice, you know, for our high school, or for at least 3 years of high school. So we would have that Catholic education, Catholic peers, other people that their parents valued it enough to send them there, and the religious, the sisters, the priests, to be around them, to see their example, because they're inspiring. The ones that I know, they're inspiring, and they did that for us, and they made the faith something real. And for those that had that, obviously, I know some that have fallen away. I know some of my former students that have fallen away. I hope and pray that they come back. They've had it instilled in them. If they ever start praying again, you know,
Yeah.
they'll have that given. But you know, college is a death sentence, and almost all the time it's a death sentence for people that don't have a strong faith or don't have good friends and sacraments around them. So, yeah, I think the biggest factor, outside of course, the givens, the mass, prayer, daily prayer, you know, spiritual reading, those are all givens. If you're not doing that, how are you going to keep the faith in this world? But I think one of the biggest factors is, who are your friends? And if you see Catholics that have Catholic friends that are good examples, they're helping each other out, trying to be Catholic, that they go to mass together and the faith means something to them, they stay, and they either get married or they join the convent or the seminary, or they, you know, build families. They stay. The peers are so important. If you bring your kids to mass, you know, 3 days a week, 4 days a week, 5 days a week, but then the things that they want to do, they're hanging around with a bunch of pagans, or even, you know, Novus Ordo people that don't really care what you do, but have all these different standards. If they don't have a Catholic standard, they're probably going to lose the faith.
Right.
That's not a given. Everybody's different. Everybody can be the outlier, or they can pray and they can change. I'm not saying it's a done deal, but to me, that's what I've seen. And that's what I've been working with kids, you know,
Yeah,
teaching for many years.
you want to give your
So-
kids the best shot. You don't want to have any regrets of like, well, they fell away. You want them to, if they're going to fall away, it should be their decision, not because you put them in bad situations
Right.
where they were influenced by junk.
You don't want to be responsible for it.
Right. Well, it seems
They're going to have to
me-
answer to God for their decisions. But if you haven't, as parents, if you don't provide them with the best you can under their circumstances, you don't want to be liable for it. Yeah.
Right. Seems to me that because I have a lot of conversations with people who were raised in the Novus Ordo, and their parents did the best they could in the Novus Ordo, and it seems like it doesn't matter. Whereas it seems like in the traditional way of practicing the faith, then the parent factor can matter. So if you have the parent only factor, these post-conciliar practices are still a death knell. This is anecdotal.
Sure.
It's just everything I've seen. Whereas from what you're describing, and what I would presume is, if you have a good faith formation, it's not a given. But if you then couple that with a solid family life and peer group, now you're really humming on all cylinders.
Yeah.
But
Well,
you really, ideally, you need both.
That's really well put, and I'll just add in there is the priests and the nuns. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, for them, we didn't just read about what it is to be virtuous; we saw it. We didn't just read about what it means to be self-sacrificing or devoted or charitable. We saw it,
Yeah.
and that's what these religious and the priests, that's what they're devoted to. It just blows my mind when I hear stories about the Novus Ordo trained seminarians or whatever else, and what the differences in a Novus Ordo parish versus what I grew up with. It just blows my mind. I just can't even fathom what that's like. And then the good rapport. This is something too that was a big change, because in the CMRI, oh, I'm sorry to hear that about your son. Don't give up. Don't give up. He can come around. Just
I came
pray
around.
for him.
I came around after college. College
Yeah.
is just a cesspool.
Yeah, but with like there's been, with the Samurai and with other groups too, I'm sure, but in particular the Samurai after Vatican II, in the early days, the Samurai was really, really over strict and really rigid, and everybody thought the world was ending, and you got whatever. And then you throw in Schuckardt, who went crazy, and all this other stuff. And a lot of people left because it was too far the other way. You had the liberalism on one side, and then they went the opposite extreme and went way too strict.
Yeah.
After Schuckardt and all that other stuff, it has been in the middle, and that's what I've grown up with, is the middle course. Strict about the important non-negotiables, but also, charitable and patient and supportive and whatever. Perfect? No. But doing the best they can? Yes. And so it made the clergy so approachable. And like the bishop, for example, like I know he has students that he's taught 10 years ago or 3 years ago where they will call him up. These kids will call him up and be like, "Hey, Bishop, somebody said this. Can you help me out with this?" And this is, my bishop has the busiest man in the world. He's doing so much. But if he gets former students or kids that call with questions, he answers a phone and he helps them through it, because the kids know you can ask. You can ask these questions. If I don't know the answer, I know there is an answer. And so that rapport with the priests and the sisters was huge too, because they were good examples. They were friends, not like buddy, but you feel comfortable asking them and talking to them. And that's something I really try to do with the kids here, is keep up that, good example. And also, I love the faith and I love talking about the faith. And if you have questions, please, we'll have a great conversation. Please bring it up. Let's talk about it.
No, that's great. All right, let's get into online Sedevacantism. That'll be our last topic for the night.
This has been I really appreciate you having me on. This has been a nice conversation.
Of course. Do we have a verdict chat? Is he a Sane Sede? We have a lot of people that I've not recognized before, and I think I drew in a lot of Sedevacantists. Seems to be some type of debate going on. I'm not going to read it all, but I think we're going to get into it, which is, and thank you again, Father, for making the time. I know you're busy. The traditionalist priests always are, as well as the bishops, because they're so stretched. And this is why I wanted to have you on, is because I know that I think I have this theory. It's completely untested and unfounded, although you are proving it correct, that most of the Sedevacantists are, one, offline, and two, those that are offline are just, normal Catholics. I mean, look, as someone who attends everything pre-conciliar, I'm just one step slightly normalized, quote unquote. I still get a bunch. People think I'm weird. So one, I think that the online, you correct me if I'm going to throw out some thoughts, and you temperature check me here. Okay. I think online Sedevacantism is generally doing a bad PR job. Now, by online, I strictly mean Twitter. I mean, okay, sure. But Twitter, Twitter's kind of the public space. Now, I don't mean the sisters or anything like that. I mean, there's certain personalities that seem to have no charity at all. And that was my only interaction with Sedevacantists. And I'm curious about your thoughts, because clearly, and I've heard it from all Sedevacantists, the crazy ones, the non-crazy ones, they carry that ostracizing feel. And it must be a difficult thing. That everybody, I mean, maybe it's just part of the theory on the Pope. You're naturally going to create some enemies with that. So that comes with the territory. But it seems like there's, you guys get attacked a lot.
Hmm.
Does it feel like that? Does it feel like you're a black sheep? And if so, how much of that do you blame on some of these random troll types?
Hmm. Well, as the saying goes, it takes two to tango.
Yeah.
And in every group, you're going to have people that are more extreme or not as even tempered. And I'm relatively new to the online space.
Mhm.
I think I've already mentioned that I'm relatively new, so I haven't seen a lot of the history or whatever, but I've seen a lot of the interactions, and it kind of blows my mind how they can be sometimes vicious. Yeah, sure, but everybody's doing that on Twitter. It's
Right.
like everybody's doing that, whether it's liberals, whether it's conservatives, whether it's even Novus Ordo, whoever. Everybody has their chip on their shoulder where they really struggle to be charitable or whatever. But as I said, it's a lot of times I think the frustration comes from you have a Sedevacantist that will present a church teaching like straight from the Council of Trent or Pope Pius XII or Pope Pius IX or Pope St. Pius, whatever. They'll
Mhm.
present something and then it gets dismissed and then you're called immediately, you're Protestant. Why the heck should we listen to you? You
Mhm.
guys are a bunch of crazies. And like, that isn't a nice, I mean, people really like to attack the online sedes for being vicious, but boy, have you seen the way that some of the sedes are treated? I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
it's
I
pretty bad on the other end too.
I get treated the worst by the Novus Ordo types. Well, I haven't had it in a long time, but it used to happen a lot, and I think they don't like to engage with me anymore because I mean, quite not to brag. Maybe I am bragging. Fine, I'll brag. I've just
You're a
so
lawyer. Go ahead.
I've so
Plead your
thoroughly
case.
shut them down. Like
Yeah.
I have the response track at this point. It's like they're gonna say
Okay.
this. I know what to say in response. So I mean, I even have saved drafts in my phone.
Okay.
So I'll just
Yeah.
copy paste, and I'm
Nice.
just swatting these people away. But they are nasty. When you
Mm,
talk about there's issues with Vatican II, when you talk about there's issues with
right.
the new mass, I those are the nastiest.
Hmm.
I haven't had one in a while, but like I used to have them every week online. So this is not like a pick on the Sedevacantists.
No, no,
It's
no. I understand where you're coming from. Yeah.
it's simply that my only exposure to Sedevacantism was a nastiness online. It wasn't
Hmm.
until it was actually, obviously seeing you, but others as well through Anthony Abate's. Anthony Abate
Hmm.
is the biggest ecumenical guy on the he just wants to be friends with everyone. So, I got exposed to this and I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, the again, I think anybody who's online, I mean, I'm like this. I will get into arguments with people because my perception, particularly on Twitter, is that of we're in a combative state.
Hmm. Yeah.
And the algorithm does that to us. So I do get it. Um but yes, my general perception of Sedevacantists was the limited online, generally anonymous, although I'm not against anonymous statuses. It was generally anonymous accounts who would go way too far, getting into personal
Hmm.
attacks.
Hmm.
And which, anybody can do that. Liberals love that. Atheists love that. What do you think the efficaciousness of needling an RNR type over and over and
Mm.
over again? I see that with
I think. Yeah.
the SSPX cropped up, and I couldn't tell if I was talking to a James Martin adherent or a Sedevacantist. They were like, "You're schismatic. You need to like."
Yeah.
To show the cognitive dissonance that the Sedevacantist believes exists may be useful, but how efficacious is it to constantly needle Dr. Kwasniewski over and over and over and over?
Yeah.
Or should we
Yeah.
maybe? I'm loving the Novus Ordo watch, Mario Dirksen warring with Mike Lewis right now. I'm like, yes, this is the true enemy. And Mike Lewis has Mike has no idea what Mike is so out of his depth. He doesn't know what's going on, and Mario's just hammering him like this. So
Yeah.
what do you? I mean, I think we should turn all of our guns towards the modernists, but it just seems to me that the online Sede will annoy the crap out of the R&R to the point of the R&R then just blocking or dismissing out
Yeah.
of pure annoyance. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on
Well, I want to mention first. I want to draw a line between the Feniites in general that are
Explain that.
Sedevacantists.
Explain that to me for a bit in context, as well as for those in the chat, because I'm not. My
Yeah.
lay of
So
Sede land is limited.
it's a denial of baptism of blood and baptism of desire as the church has taught it through the centuries, as the fathers and doctors of the church have spoken about it, as the Council of Trent speaks about it. And they deny that following the writings of Father Feeney, who was excommunicated by Pope Pius XII,
Okay.
then later let back into the church by Paul VI, interestingly. But anyway.
And these are Sedevacantists, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So their main proponent, or their main voice, is the Diamond Brothers, who are the Most Holy Family Monastery. They have Vatican Catholic YouTube channel or website, whatever, and they're brilliant. They're really good at debating and whatever the content, the videos they put out, and 90% of the stuff they say is good, but then there's a 5 or 10% that is poison and twists or misrepresents the teaching of the church. And I'm sure we're going to have somebody jump on here real quick and say how I'm a heretic because I said that. Because the Diamondite zombies, as I call them, have this narrow.
You're in the clear, because there's some chat war going on. I'm gonna let them hammer it out. Okay. So we have online arguing with them.
Yeah.
So keep going.
It's a topic that gets kind of raw and sensitive for me because I've known some people that have fallen into it, and it's difficult. So basically, it's a denial of the church's teaching of that, and it's, again, I see it as a response. The ones now, the Diamond Brothers and others, I see it as a response, that pendulum swing again of, the modernism, all religions are good and everybody's saved, basically, to unless you are baptized with water, period, you are going to hell, period. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Nothing about invincible ignorance, nothing about catechumens, whatever. Right. And there's different levels of it, but they are like, they some of them that are vocal are really extreme. And basically, I mean, somebody dies and they say they're in hell.
Yes,
even if they were a Catholic bishop or whatever,
right.
Like a traditional Sedevacantist Catholic bishop, even.
Yeah.
So there's
those are the examples I'm talking about, and that was my only exposure to Sede. That's actually most people's exposures to Sedevacantism, which is why I wanted to have you on, to show that, like, actually that's the, I hate to use the liberal term, but the vocal minority.
They're very vocal, and I have some belief with others that they have a lot of bots doing their work for them as well, because yes, I've known a few Feeniites in my life, and in certain areas of the country they have more of them because they might have some clergy that have fallen into it and have their own thing going. But in general, I mean, I don't have any in my parish. If you are one, let me know and we'll have a conversation, but I don't have any in my parish. I've known some, and I've known some that have left it, but it's very, very small. But they will get on every YouTube channel and every Twitter thread and post long things, whatever, and they are unbelievably obnoxious. I got called a heretic because I like Lord of the Rings. I say it's okay to read Lord of the Rings now from them because it talks about magic, and they quoted this long thing from the Council of Trent or something like that. And so now I'm against the Pope because I like Lord of the Rings, and whatever, that I choose my wizard hats and staffs more than the Catholic faith or something. Like,
I mean, the playbook is the same. They insult you to your face and then give you a massively overly burdensome thing to watch or read, and say that if you just read or watch this, you'll finally discover the faith. I'm like, you do understand. First off, that sounds extremely cultish, but it's also terrible PR. Like, don't insult your customer. I just want to put that out there for anybody who's trying to convince somebody.
Free legal advice, huh?
Yeah, like, I don't know. Again, these are anonymous accounts, and I don't ask them, "Are you a Feeniite or whatnot?" Because they'll just, it says in the bio, Sedevacantism. Oh, I got my first super chat.
Finally,
there we go. All right, let me pop this up. To be fair, I would not consider a Feeniite Catholic. I think a Feeniite a Catholic, given their denial of body and blood.
That's baptism of desire and baptism of blood. That's what that's short for. Yeah.
I got my Sede translator here. Home Alone. Explain the Home Alone. I think I know what it is, but thank you, Florida Low Carb DPC, for my first super chat. What is the Home Alone concept?
It's that after Vatican II, there's no ordinary jurisdiction, so therefore bishops cannot consecrate or ordain priests or bishops because they don't have ordinary jurisdiction. You can't do that without a papal mandate. and that ignores, priests and bishops have talked about this and very clearly shown that the church supplies the necessary jurisdiction to do this for the good of souls. But they get stuck in that there's no ordinary jurisdiction. There's no ordinary jurisdiction. You can't do this without papal mandate. If we don't have a pope, you can't consecrate or ordain, period. And so they see it as being wrong, completely wrong to go to a mass or priest anywhere. Because there's no pope and there's no bishops that have been alive since Vatican II. I believe Mel Gibson's father had that opinion of the jurisdiction. Hudson Gibson, he actually wrote some things about it. They had even an old priest, Father Procopio, at Mel Gibson's place there for a long time until he passed away. But I don't know where Mel Gibson is now on that position. But so that's a home alone position. A lot of the Feniites are, yes, because nobody's pure enough for them, I should say.
It strikes me, and I'll be bold enough to insult them if because I'm just learning about this. So I'll be bold enough to throw out an insult. It strikes me as a convenient theological explanation to create your own interpretation that others can now follow you and what you say, instead of, all the other hierarchy is illegitimate, so you got to follow me, Mr. Diamond Bro. I don't know, I'm not a cult expert, but that's just, it's flirting with it, man.
And I agree. I would also say I can appreciate someone saying, well, that's exactly what you're doing with the seminary, is you're saying everybody else is crazy and you're saying you got to follow us. And
that's what
I understand where that's coming from, but there's a big difference when it is, we're just pointing to the teachings of the church. They're cutting and pasting the quotes and making these videos and saying, you got to watch this to understand. You really got to watch Diamond Brothers.
They're also just denying dogma.
Yeah.
So that's, I mean, that's the, I do wonder about that. You wonder, like, because I'm a traditionalist, I'm more on the R&R side, and it's like, am I in a cult? I don't wonder this often, obviously, because otherwise I would be freaking out. But it's like, you always want a caliber check. You're like, am I too much? And am I still sane? It's good to always take stock of your faculties every once in a while.
A lot smarter people than you and I have been deceived. That's for sure.
Yeah. Never be, maybe the Novus Ordo is right all along.
Yeah, right. Well, there's no God anyway. Let's just do whatever we want. And Home Alone is going to clip that and say, see, CMRI is heretics. The second part of that, or the first part of that super chat you sent in, was they're saying they shouldn't even be considered Catholic because they deny baptism of desire and baptism of blood. And we answer, what I would say with that is, just with the confusion or not the clarity perhaps it's given on that pertinent specific thing from the church. We don't consider that, and we follow the policy that the bishops in the United States did before Vatican II, when Father Feeney was causing the trouble in I think it was Boston, where the Catholic bishops, this was in 1930s, 1940s or something, even though Father Feeney had been excommunicated and Pope Pius XII signed it himself, they would not refuse the sacraments to their faithful that fell for these errors, unless they were publicly like proselytizing, publicly trying to push it, whatever. Then they're like, okay, you cannot do that. If you continue to do that, we refuse the sacraments. So that's what we do. If somebody is like pushing it and causing problems and promoting it, we're like, you can't do this. Stop now, or else, whatever. But with all the confusion of the day, to call them just, whatever, Diamond Brothers, I put them in a different category, but normal faithful.
I was talking to Stephen Cox about this. I said, I really hope that God shows us a lot of grace due to the confusion.
He will.
Did you get Sedevacantism right, or sede-privation, or recognize and resist, or hermeneutic of continuity? I'm like, this is insane. It's absolutely insane. And so do your best. I mean, that, of course, always do your best. That's the cheapest advice ever. But
yeah,
I think a lot of people do get a lot of anxiety over it. I mean, I see people crash out all the time. We got another one. Ryan, also, you should have a look at Canon 8.4. Well, okay, hold on. I'll take notes. Canon 844 2-4. All right. 844. See, guys, you super chat me, and I'll write stuff down. I will check this out. A universal law of the new religion contrary to divine law, thus contrary to mark of holiness. Thank you, Florida. I will check that out.
And I wanted to respond
Whoops.
again to Christopher here. He said the Diamond Brothers led me to Sede privationism, which
Yeah.
I've known a lot of people too that when they started looking for answers, they found the Diamond Brothers videos about Vatican II and the errors of Vatican II and all this other stuff, and that they didn't stick with them because it was like they got the vibes, cult vibes, or the lack of charity or condemning everyone, even good bishops and priests. But for a lot of them, it was a stepping stone. It gave them some answers. Like I have a lot of people that was a stepping stone,
Right.
and a source of information. So God uses even evil for great good.
I mean, I wouldn't give religion a shot. I actually just recorded my conversion story.
Oh, cool.
I haven't
Nice.
released it yet, but I talk about how I read a whole book on philosophy, but when I came to Thomas Aquinas, I wouldn't even give him a time of day because he reasons from the presupposition that God exists, and I wasn't sure on that, so I kind of dismissed him. It was Jordan Peterson that made me made approaching Christianity respectable again in the mainstream, which got me thinking. And of course, Jordan's gone off the deep end more recently than he was at the time, but he certainly wasn't, Council of Trent or
Sure.
epitome of orthodoxy there. But he started breaking barriers down for me. So yeah, there's good in all of us. I will say one more comment. We're at the 2-hour mark, so I think we'll probably wrap. I do want to make my last pitch here though on what's going on in the church, and that is this. I think give people some grace when it comes to whether they're Catholic or not. Also, for anybody out there, because I get a wide variety of listeners, not like I'm some great speaker or big voice like Taylor Marshall or anyone like that, but for my limited viewers, I would say we're going to be called a lot of things. Schismatic Protestant over the next coming years. The Sedevacantists are not Protestant, even if I disagree with them on that particular issue. And SSPX and recognizing resistors are not Protestant. The Protestants didn't simply say there is no Pope. The Protestants didn't simply say we must resist the Pope on this particular error. The Protestants completely redid the faith. Okay? When you're talking to an SSPX or a Sedevacantist who says, we just want to continue to practice the faith it always was, Martin Luther never said that. Martin Luther was pushing for radical change. Okay,
Revolt.
So just because you're even great saints had disagreements with popes. That does not make you a Protestant. That leads me into my last thing, which is exactly what I had Father on. We need to start banding together very quickly, because this storm is getting worse. And the one thing that the modernists want more than anything is for us to be fighting about the one thing that we disagree on. And it's a response to the most novel, in my opinion, the most novel crisis in the church. Whether you think the hierarchy is valid or you think they're completely corrupted but still valid, it is unlike even the Arian crisis. So we really should be treating each other with a higher degree of charity and respect. And quite honestly, I really look forward to Mario Dirksen just jumping all over Mike Lewis, and maybe less on Kwasniewski. This is just that's just my personal wish for him. I think showing the cognitive dissonance of the normie to the normie is way more beneficial. Look, an R&R type will probably Sede and R&R will cross-populate on their own volition. It probably won't be because the Sedevacantist account tweeted at them for the 20th time, and vice versa. And vice versa, guys. Like I can speak for the R&Rs. Like you got to chill on the Sede hate. This is just. I know it's not inconsequential, because from the Sedevacantist position, it would be like, look, this is really important. So we can't just make peace with error for the sake of winning the war. I get that, but I think we should destroy the enemy first, and then we can fight. But Father, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a pleasure. I'd like to give you the closing remarks and anything you'd like to say, where we can find you online, if you have any channels to plug. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, again, I said it already. I really appreciate the opportunity. Um, uh, just Providence has arranged it as he has. Um, very grateful for the opportunity. I hope a lot of good comes from it. I hope some souls are helped by it. That's the whole purpose of what we're trying to do, is help souls get to heaven. That's the mission of the church: preserve revelation and get souls to heaven. Um, so many things I could say. I think it's as you said, real life is very different from the online world, obviously. And I never had any experience with people from, say, for example, the Society of St. Pius X. And what I read about the errors or disagreements with the position or whatever else, I'm like, holy cow, this is crazy. And I've actually never had an opportunity to talk to an SSPX priest. I don't know if they would want to, but I've just never had the opportunity. But I've got to meet, as a priest, many people from the Society of St. Pius X or from the Resistance or other groups. And I'm like, these people are good Catholics. They just want to be Catholic. They're wonderful people. They're living the same way I was raised, the same way my people are living. They're good Catholics. Every group is going to have their good and their bad, their ugly and whatever. Every group does. We have it. They have it. Everyone has it. But in general, we have good Catholics that are confused and misled and whatever. We can take a look at their errors here or their errors here, or it seems like there's a contradiction here or there. But it's like, at the end of the day, we're trying to be Catholic, and there should be a lot of grace given, a lot of understanding. And I think there's a lot of people that are very zealous. I know a lot of people, good people, that are Sedevacantists, that are very zealous, that love the faith so much, that found it after having to search for it for so long, after having so many difficulties. They love it so much. They have such a zeal and passion for it. And they're trying to help people. They're trying to shine the light on things that got them or helped them. You mentioned earlier that it was through Jordan Peterson that you came to, accept, or that was a stepping stone.
Yep.
And it takes all kinds. Some people need like that sledgehammer to like punch some truth into their faith and get their attention and be like, wow, I didn't know that. What else didn't I know? Other people, it's by a very slow, long process. And, it takes all different types. And I think we should be really, really careful about just throwing around heretic and Protestant and schismatic and all this other stuff. We should be really careful about that. There are those, yes. But the only soul I have certainty about is me, because I don't know what's going through the soul and mind and heart of others. And I know there are much better people than me that are in different camps, that have been misled, that have had things explained as they were explained to me, or clarified the way they were clarified to me. It's by the grace of God that anyone has the faith. It's by the grace of God that anyone gets to heaven. And in these times, I think we both would agree that these are the times of the great apostasy. There's so much confusion. There's so much confusion. And we talk about charity a lot, and that's important. And I have some very good friends that I mentioned the one who took him many, many years to get through all the Protestant groups and then the Catholic camps and whatever. And he said, I'm convinced that until people really focus on charity above all else, which is the whole point of the law, until people focus on charity, there's going to be no healing. There's going to be no coming together. There's going to be no this group and that group get to whatever. We need a pope. That's our position. We believe we don't have a pope and we want one. We need one. It is not fun to be in the situation we're in, our position. It's not fun. We don't want to be here, but it's the only one that makes sense to us and doesn't have contradictions from our perspective. But we don't want that. And we want to be Catholic, and we want other people to be Catholic. But charity is the whole point. And perhaps not until we have greater charity amongst ourselves will God actually bless us, hear our prayers, and intervene in some way through good clergy and through good laity to bring about some resolution eventually of this. And while we pray for charity, this will be the last thing I say, and then I'll leave everyone in peace. Besides charity, I would encourage everyone, especially when you're talking with people online or talking with people that come to visit, or whatever else, pray for prudence. This is a virtue that doesn't get talked about enough or encouraged enough. We have a prudence in dealing with others. What's the goal? The goal is to try to lead them to the faith. And we want God to help us with that, to have a supernatural prudence that is aided by God, by the Holy Ghost, and his inspirations and his encouragement, here and now, not just our own prudence or our own zeal that sometimes can get out of bounds. I was just talking to my students this morning. I have a theology class with, we have 7 high school students, I think. Really great group of kids. Love these kids. They're great. And with my classes, we go over apologetics a lot. I don't use books. We just sit down. I'll ask them questions or have them ask questions, and then we discuss it. And I asked them a question today about, I forget what it was, something to do with the Novus Ordo or Protestant, whatever it was. And one of their responses was like, it basically just threw it back at me that you're wrong and you don't know what you're talking about and whatever. And it was like, it was kind of funny because, they're high school kids. They're trying to come up with an answer. Mm-hmm. But I kind of threw it back to them. Like, you really think you're going to be able to help somebody by just saying you're a heretic or you're wrong? Like, how are you going to help somebody with that? Like, yeah. I know they weren't prepared for it. Anyway, a lot of times that can happen. And that's why I just want to encourage that people pray for prudence, that we pray to the Holy Ghost to help us. Delete the text if you need to and think about it later. Save it as a draft, as you said, whatever. But the point is not to win or make points. It's to help souls get to heaven. And sometimes we can be a wrecking ball to that. And sometimes, we can really help. But pray for prudence and pray for the help of the Holy Ghost.
Well put, Father. My Twitter draft folder is filled with tweets that would send me if I didn't repent of them. I type out this angry thing. I'm like, this.
You're just smart. Yeah,
you just get a feeling. I'm like, I should not send this. So
you're smart. I usually just delete them or have to delete them later after I repent and realize. But
the pasta says, "Thank you, Father Naren, for doing this podcast. Hopefully, more of these are coming in the future." Thank you for the kind words, sir. With that, we will close out. Father, again, thank you for joining us. You can find Father on Twitter, where he will be tweeting only charitable things.
Working on it.
Yeah, same. Well, anyways, thank you all for joining. Appreciated the comments, as well as the 2 super chats, my first 2 super chats. So thank you again for that. Like, subscribe, share with your friends. And again, once this is posted, if you leave a comment, I will select my favorite comment and read it off on the next live stream. With that, thank you for tuning in, and Godspeed.